Welcome to the ferocious islands. As a result of both plate tectonics and the changes in sea levels, some parts of Squalosia's continental landmass split off from the mainland to form vast islands, home to unique forms of plant and animal life, oftentimes very different in lifestyle and appearance from their mainland counterparts. Squalosia's island fauna tend to experience high degrees of adaptive radiation, gigantism, or dwarfism, all trends common among island creatures of Earth. One such island, Bisnia, split off from Kamadu as the continents continued to drift and split apart as a result of both plate tectonics and changes in sea levels. Curiously, despite being part of a planet of sharks, no salachopods lived on Bisnia in the Ferococene, with the dominant fauna instead being brachiopods, who migrated from North Lyrasia around 183 million years post-colonization. The island's subtropical climate made it ideal for these flying mollusks. The most widespread brachiopods on Bisnia were the ambulolatans, a flightless clade whose wings developed into walking limbs. Ambulolatus pteropoda was one of the most common and a peaceful grazer that lived in small groups. With no bone to speak of, the animal was somewhat limited in size compared to a salagopod of a similar niche, although this was somewhat mitigated by its weight-bearing toes and network of muscle fibers. Still, it wasn't a particularly fast creature. Angulated pteropoda was around 3 feet or 90 centimeters in height, making it about as large as a middle white boar. Its young hatched from their eggs at only 2 inches tall and lived independently from their parents, only congregating with other ambulolatus by instinct. Unlike its relative Ambulolatus pteropoda, A. longibrachium had adaptations for a browsing lifestyle, including longer oral tentacles and pillar-like legs to support a greater mass. Superficially resembling a miniature elephant, the longibrachium had very few natural predators when fully grown, although juveniles were still prime targets. However, its greater size came with the drawback of needing large amounts of food to maintain, with an adult eating up to a 50th of its weight every day. Compared to Ambulolatus pteropoda, A. longibrachium was a larger and more heavy-set animal, growing up to 4 feet or 135 centimeters tall, or as large as an Argali ram. Its young were half a foot tall upon hatching and fed on lower shrubs than the adults. Even though herbivorous ambulatans were among the most abundant, others continued to feed on animal matter as their ancestors did. Megalochirus cuniculus was a rotund creature with well-developed forelimbs suited to carve out burrows, although it also rested in the halls of trees if necessary. Small extensions of its tentacles formed setae that allowed it to feel for the vibrations given off by its prey. It preferred to hunt small invertebrates, including moth larvae and spiders. Among the smaller of the ambulatans, Megalochirus cuniculus grew to about the size of a guinea pig, reaching up to 16 inches or 40.5 centimeters in length. Baby Megalochirus were only an eighth of that size when born and hunted smaller animals ignored by the adults, like springtails. Distantly related to Megalochirus, Malacox canete was an apex predator in the Bisnian ecosystem. Unlike other ambulatans, it could manage a short run that made it built for pursuit, although it was slower and had less stamina than a squalosaur counterpart. Malacox had small, tooth-like barbs on its oral tentacles that were suited to work in tandem with the hooks on their tips and bleed out its prey. Unlike most mollusks, it also had binocular vision that granted it greater depth perception. Malacox canete could reach a body length up to 40 inches or about 102 centimeters from the base of its oral tentacles to the tip of its tail, similar to a mid-sized pit bull. Its babies hatched around 4 inches long and hunted smaller game like arthropods or worms. While Bisnia was devoid of salachopods, populations of euhemicillian sharks still migrated through its waterways. Palurex macrocauda, a member of the same family as Malacox, was an animal that capitalized on this new food source by evolving to specialize for a semi-aquatic lifestyle. With flatter toes and a paddle-like tail to aid in swimming, this piscivore's hooked tentacles were ideal for spearing its slippery prey. Large groups could be seen during a mass spawning. Palurex macrocauda, while among the largest of its kin, was still relatively small among Ferococene fauna at approximately 30 inches or 76 centimeters long, rivaling a small Siberian husky. Its young were 3 inches long upon birth and more terrestrial, feeding on other amphibious animals like polychaete worms. Olandu was a larger island that drifted from the continent of South Larusa, which, as a result of being so close to Squalosia's equator, frequently experienced tropical storms. The dominant animal clade here was the lineage of basal chelocarporids, likely washed onto Olandu's shore on debris like wood or vegetation during one such storm. This rafting event would have been similar to many postulated to have occurred on Earth. Some of the chelocarporids remained diminutive insectivores as their ancestors were. Microcarcharia timidus was skittish and hid away in the undergrowth or burrows, preferring to flee rather than fight back when threatened. Although its elongated canine teeth were of very little use in defense, they were quite effective at piercing the exoskeletons of arthropod prey. Similar to the extinct mammal Cronopio, Microcarcharia also bore a more fragile frame than its stockier, more rotund ancestors. Microcarcharia timidus was an extremely small species, being a little more than 4 inches minus the tail, or as long as a southern short-tailed shrew. Its pups were equally tiny, if not far more so, at only the size of a Cadbury mini egg upon hatching. These helpless young remained in their mother's burrow before reaching maturity. While small chelocarporids were still present on Olandu, many species mushroomed in size in the absence of competing neonicopods. Romaleophonius novacellae was a gigantic, saber-toothed apex predator that convergently evolved to resemble gygagnathids on the mainland. Like them, it overpowered prey with its bulk and a killing blow from its deadly jaws. Despite appearances, Romaleophonius was a close relative of the smaller Microcarcharia. Romaleophonius novacellae was one of the largest predatory chelocarporids to ever live, reaching 6.5 feet, or about 2 meters in length, rivaling a grizzly bear. Romaleophonius mothers typically laid 2 or 3 eggs per clutch, birthing 7-inch-long pups who will be fed and taught to hunt large game by their mother. The reason macropredators like Romaleophonius found such success on Olandu was due to the abundance of large prey. Rostrotherium herbivora was notable for the evolution of a miniature trunk formed from its upper lip, a similar adaptation for manipulating food to the Squalosia of the Monstrosine. While less intelligent than carcharodonts, like them it lived in herds, if much smaller than between 4 and 5 individuals. Because of this, interspecific competition was rare. Rostrotherium herbivora was nearly 8 feet, or 2.5 meters in length when fully grown, making it as large as a small moose. Its calves hatched from their eggs at around 11 inches long and were cared for by the entire herd to maximize their survival, as a greater number of guardians meant greater protection from predators. Aside from chelocarporids, the animals that saw the most breakout success on Olandu were the earthworms. While also native to the mainland, the banded nidhogg reached its greatest sizes on the massive island. While gigantic compared to its smaller kin, it lived in much the same way as an average worm, namely by feeding on decaying matter and recycling nutrients into the soil. The nidhogg spent most of its life underground, only rarely emerging in the wet season. The banded nidhogg was truly massive for an earthworm, reaching up to 28 feet or 8.5 meters in length and 51 kilograms in weight, making it as large as some species of python. Newly hatched nidhoggs were half a foot long and served as prey for many larger animals. The most recently formed of the major islands at 192 million years post-colonization, Squalosia is unique in that it is actually an archipelago, consisting of 2 massive landmasses and smaller volcanic islands that will be nearly invisible on a map. It is also the most biodiverse of the islands, having contained a menagerie of animal life adaptable enough to survive being separated from the South Eurasian mainland. Anonymopods were a common sight in lush Polynesian tropics, including the predator Gigantogyrannus mod. With a similar body plan to the Monstrosine carcharodile, it fulfilled a similar role in clearing its watery territory of those unlucky enough to linger while it was hungry. Salt glands on the snout made Gigantogyrannus equally at home in fresh or salt water, allowing it to survive changes in salinity that would be catastrophic for most. As a side effect, it can also cross the sea to nest on other islands. Gigantogyrannus mod wholly lived up to its generic name, growing to lengths of up to 15 feet or 4.5 meters, rivaling a bull American alligator. When newly hatched, its fully aquatic young were about 8 inches long and fed on smaller sharks before their transition from water to land set in. Other Anonycopods adapted to an increasingly terrestrial existence. Caudicyrus carpophagus was a semi-arboreal species whose tail fin developed into a muscular, prehensile appendage to increase its leverage as it clung to the branches of trees. A peaceful animal, mostly found in the fruit its lush habitat provided, sometimes eating peppers rich in capsaicin nests, although its more varied diet makes it only mildly poisonous compared to the monstrosine genus Picantosaurus, among others. Caudicyrus carpophagus was about 6 inches long from the tip of its snout to the base of its tail when fully grown, making it similar in size to a Philippine tarsier. While adults were obviously frugivorous, their half-inch long pups fed on aquatic invertebrates in the area. The plant life on Squalosia proved to be as unique as the animals living there. One particularly successful species was the nursery lettuce. The lettuce plant uniquely adapted to store rainwater in a reservoir formed from its own leaves, which served as a nesting site for many species of small Anonycopod, including Caudicyrus. The developing pups would be kept safe from predators as they grew, while their fecal matter fertilized the plant with nitrogen, similar to bromeliads on Earth. Although Anonycopods made up the majority of Selachopod species on Squalosia, some use Selachopods call the archipelago home. The vacuum mouth was a relative of the mainland spring anteater that walked on its knuckles to keep its forepaws sharp for digging into spring ant nests. Unlike its relative, it didn't feed by using its barbels, but instead used powerful lungs that allowed it to rapidly gulp massive quantities of air, dragging its lightweight prey into its mouth in the resulting tailwind. The vacuum mouth was the largest known fully terrestrial animal in Squalosia in the Ferococene, measuring almost 5 feet or 1.5 meters in length and weighing about 32 kilograms. Its young were 4 inches long upon hatching and were mostly arboreal, lacking their parents' lung capacity and feeding with their barbels. Some marine arthropods, like the secondarily aquatic Hydropapillon, found success by resting on the island coast away from competition. Tenaciolyturpus, a descendant of this razor-whip moth, still spent much of its time in the sea but was able to haul itself onto land, with especially large gatherings being present during breeding season. Its 4 legs, once used to capture prey, became stabilizing flippers to allow the moth a greater degree of aquatic agility as its proboscis dealt a fatal blow on prey. Tenaciolyturpus is one of the larger species of razor-whip moth, boasting a 3-foot-wide wingspan, which was thrice its body length. Like its ancestor, its caterpillars are fully aquatic, hatching in lengths of 2 inches and hunt smaller prey like crustaceans. Neotrilobites remained abundant throughout the Ferococene, with many species veering into more specialized niches, especially on the islands. Xylophorus mandibularis was a giant known for its enormous mandibles, which it used to gnaw through tough vegetation, including wood and tree bark. While the Neotrilobite had durable chitin armor that made it virtually impregnable, it was unable to roll into a ball like its relative with its mouth parts, and was thus helpless when flipped over. Xylophorus mandibularis was a foot in body length, not terribly large by the standards of life on Squalosia, but gigantic compared to other Neotrilobites. Newly hatched babies of this species were around half an inch long and nestled in dead or dying wood before their exoskeletons fully hardened. Despite the commonality of Selachopods on Squalosia, the top predator was a giant onychobrachid spider. Onychophonius erectus was a creature that could wrestle with prey as large as a vacuum mouth, bleeding it out with vicious bite wounds while its anticoagulant venom hastened the process. The spider's unusually large size was a product of insular gigantism, combined with Squalosia's inherently lower gravity and higher oxygen content. It helped that its legs were held beneath the body. Onychophonius erectus was the largest onychobrachid in Squalosian history, reaching 3 feet long and 1.5 feet tall when fully grown. Its spiderlings, born around 3 inches long, were too large for ballooning, instead finding food by clinging to larger animals and hunting the parasites attached to them. Neonychopods were extremely rare on Squalosia, but one species still called it home. Torvignathus parvum was a dwarf squall monstrant that lived as a scavenger and fed on carrion. Capable of crushing solid cartilage with its bite, it had little need for camouflage due to its habit of lingering around Onychophonius, which would tolerate the freeloader. Some Torvignathus have even sighted with Onychophonius spiderlings attached, suggesting a mutualism instead of a commensalism. Dwarfignathus parva was around 26 inches or 66 centimeters in height, similar in size to a Jersey giant rooster. It was twice as long from snout to tail. Dwarfignathus pups hatched from their eggs measuring 10 inches long and were fed chunks of meat gathered by the mother for 2 years before striking out on their own. Hopping between islands was a risky move for most animals due to the many oceanic predators lurking about. The Squalosian megalodon was the most fearsome and the largest of its kind, belonging to a clade of macroraptorial sharks called hemiotodonts due to their similarities to the extinct shark genus Otodus. A fierce rival of Eocarcharocetus, it avoided competition by colonizing the tropical waters surrounding Squalosia, serving as a sort of gatekeeper of the seas. The Squalosian megalodon was around the same size as a fully grown Eocarcharocetus, reaching up to 52 feet or 16 meters of body length and weighing up to 58 tons. Its pups were born measuring up to 12 feet in length and hunted smaller game than their monstrous parents. Note that this video doesn't detail everything about the islands and their inhabitants, only the most prevalent and relevant to Squalosia's history. If you don't understand what I just showed you all or are confused about anything, you can always access the Google Doc, Sporecast, or Discord for the project for more detailed information or questions. As always, the links are posted in the description. I'll try to answer any questions you have to the best of my ability. On the next episode, we'll dive into the minds of one of the strangest creatures to walk the face of Squalosia and attain a better understanding of its psychology. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you later.